So the agenda and contents of what we're going to discuss with structures in Mpumalanga will be shared with structures in Mpumalanga. It's an internal meeting, but the aim of such engagements with structures is to acknowledge the fact that there are comrades who are organizing in different platforms. Those who are associated with the former coordinator, Mike Ngobeni, those who are associated with the former convener, Mary Paddy. And we want to have one organization in Mpumalanga. So the engagements will be aimed at resolving that unnecessary parallelism that is existing in the province. And we'll do that in a much more matured political way that will persuade everyone that we should have one organization under one leadership. The details of what is going to happen there will belong to those meetings. I honestly don't think we should subject press conferences of Umkhonto Wesizwe to my views on Mbuyiseni and what and all of this. He correctly has resigned from the EFF, but I don't want to talk about that. It's not an issue which we can subject the press conference of Umkhonto Wesizwe to. We can respond, though, to an issue which is raised on what is to be done now that there is a stalemate on the revenue shortfalls, that the South African Revenue Services has not been able to optimally collect revenue that is adequate to fund the medium-term expenditure or development program. It used to be called medium-term expenditure framework, but now it's called development plans. So what we have is a revenue services and a state that is unable to optimally collect enough money to meet its obligations. And because they have failed to do so, they then now want to take more money from poor people from the value-added tax. And that becomes the resolution and the proposal of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, because that is what he did when he came into office. The first thing which he did as the head of state and president in 2018 was to increase VAT from 14% to 15%. There had never been an increase of VAT in South Africa for possibly more than 30 years, since the democratic dispensation. We actually had thought it as natural that VAT is 14%. We're taking that 14% is VAT. So actually, the VAT was a synonym of 14%. And then Mr. Ramaphosa came and then he took advantage of that period of excitement and all of those things that came with him, and then he introduced a measure which impoverish poor people, which make poor people to pay more for the basic services, which in any way have been rising in terms of cost as compared to the rising salary levels. So the actions of Mr. Ramaphosa are impoverishing poor people, is to get black people in general and Africans in particular poorer. And now there's a revenue shortfall. He wants to take advantage again and wants to make the lives of our people worse. Rich people will not feel the pain of VAT increases because they're not price sensitive. So majority of rich, mostly white people, they don't even know what is the price of bread. They don't know what is the price of anything. They pay any amount, whatever is the price, but poor people, they calculate each and every cent as to what do we expend money on for food, for transport, for this. So if you increase the VAT, it means there are so many basic services which our people will not be able to afford because there is now an increase on the value-added tax. There's multiple options. I do not know that why, despite there's so many rhetorical commitments, why are we continuing to have the funding model on infrastructure like we do currently? Because instead of allocating the budget directly or fiscal commitments to infrastructure, why are we not pursuing the build, operate, transfer model and work with our friends from the People's Republic of China, from Russia, from India to build the mega infrastructure that we need on a build, operate, transfer model, instead of priding ourselves that we're just going to throw in resources which otherwise were going to be redirected for basic services and needs. That is one. But two, I think there's an issue which has not been resolved, which was raised even in different platforms on, for a government to be able to collect revenue, there must be a base upon which it collects revenue from. That is the economy. And if that base is eroded, the tax base is eroded in terms of its activities, the revenue that the state collects will be far much lesser. And how does the tax base of South Africa gets eroded? It gets eroded through transfer pricing and illicit financial flows, where the major multinational corporations, they do not pay the taxes that are due to South Africa because they engaged in practices and the maladies of transfer pricing. So if you were to check now the revenue projections, where the shortfalls came from, they came from mostly the mining sector, because almost all the companies that are involved in the mining sector are involved in transfer pricing. So the revenue shortfall came from corporate income tax, mostly in the mining sector, because they somehow manipulate the numbers and they bloat their expenses to the extent that they do not declare any profit. If they did not declare any profit, it means they cannot be taxed. And then South Africa ends up losing a lot of potential revenue. And that is what you need, that if this government of South Africa was not an executive that is managing the common affairs of the ruling class or the bourgeoisie, it would take decisive action on optimal revenue collection in terms of what is expected. That is one category of what can be dealt with. So as part of the legislations and the bills that a Minister of Finance was going to introduce in the budget speech was something called the Eskom Relief Bill, which was going to take, I think, upward of 150 billion rands to Eskom as part of the immediate interventions. But there are so many leakages in terms of revenue collection that is supposed to be collected and is due to Eskom, because municipalities do not pay Eskom, but Eskom itself as well doesn't have efficient systems to optimally collect the revenue that it is supposed to collect so that it can be self-sustainable as a utility. So part of the interventions that have to be made now is to stabilize the revenue collection streams of Eskom. How do you optimally collect revenue for Eskom so that you do not pass an Eskom relief legislation which is going to appropriate a significant amount of money from the state into Eskom activities? So there's multiple interventions that can be made in the immediate to resolve the current revenue shortfalls that are now being shifted to the pockets of poor people. And we only need a decisive and clear government that is going to be able to do so. But the fact of the matter is that this so-called government of national unity is a committee of the white capitalists. They are deployees of the white. It was created by the white capitalists. It serves their interest. So they can't do anything that touches the establishment. They rather go and impoverish poor people. They won't touch the establishment because they are scared of their handlers in terms of how the economy and politics in South Africa are shaped. So there has to be decisive action on the owners of money, of those who own huge capital, to get to maximize revenue from their end, not from poor people, but also to make a government much more efficient in revenue collection from the municipality, provincial, and national level, so that we arrest all these leakages. And a different model on how we fund our infrastructure, which will be fiscally neutral, but will still be able to achieve the developmental objectives and agenda that we need. That is basically what a responsible government would consider. But they are possibly going to box each other and end up at 16% instead of 17%, which, as Mkhonto Wesizwe, we must still reject with contempt, because we cannot continue to impoverish our people. Of course, we must expand the basket, which is VAT-free, but we must also reject the increase of VAT on all the basic goods and services as is planned. And thank you very much. I think we have covered all the issues that we're supposed to cover with dealing with appointment of leadership of structures, and we will be indicating as to when we are appointing the structures of Eastern, Northern, and Western Capes at the provinces, and then we finalize the other structures. But in terms of the program of action that was adopted by the national officials, by the end of March, all the provincial structures must be in place and fully functioning, and all the fraternal organizations should be having solid and stable leadership structures. And that is exactly what we're going to achieve as a movement, an organization, a liberation movement that understands that you can't just gain political power and you think that you have gained total emancipation. You need to fight for total emancipation, which is political, economic, social, cultural, hegemonic, every form of freedom. That is what Mkhonto Wesizwe is fighting for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I also saw a rumor that even the Commission of SARS doesn't agree with this 3%. Maybe next time you must direct that question to him. I'll be very interested to know why he doesn't agree. Thank you very much for making time to this very important session. And we do not take your commitment and time for granted. We really appreciate the relationship that we have with yourselves. And on that basis, on behalf of the national officials and the broader leadership of MK Party,